She was forced to marry Elliot Foster, who was in a vegetative state and dying. Avery's boyfriend Cole is Elliot's nephew. Avery texted Cole hoping to elope, but never heard back. Before the wedding, she overhears a conversation between Cole and her sister Cassandra and learns that Cole is having an affair with her sister and has betrayed her. It hit her hard, and it felt like all her hopes and dreams were shattered. Despite her inner pain, Avery went through with the wedding and became Mrs. Foster. The crowd at the wedding was confused, but she was unmoved. She decided to stop being a fool and take back what was rightfully hers. Avery is dropped off at Elliot's mansion that night, and Cole arrives before he's even familiar with the layout. Cole tried to explain and persuade Avery to inherit the estate when Elliot died.
Then Elliot, who had been lying in bed, opened his eyes. Furious about the state of his marriage, he lashed out at Avery and threatened to kill them if they had children. "I'll kill them myself," he shouted.
For years later, Avery returned to her homeland with her fraternal twins, her son and daughter. Pointing to Elliot's face on the TV screen, she warned her children, "Stay away from this man. He has vowed to kill you both." Later that night, Elliot's computer is hacked, and one of the twins challenges him to kill them. "Come and get me, asshole."
The scene goes back to the night of Avery and Elliot's wedding, when Cole tries to explain and persuade Avery to wait for Elliot's inheritance when he dies, and Elliot appears to open his eyes behind Avery. Beneath the glittering crystal chandelier, Elliot's obsidian-deep eyes are magnetic yet dangerous. As always, his gaze sent chills down the spine. Cole turned pale and stumbled back a few steps. "Aunt Avery, it's late, so I won't disturb you and Uncle Elliot." Cole fled the room in a cold sweat.
Avery's heart clenched, and his body shook uncontrollably as he looked at Cole's panicked back. "Is Elliot awake yet? Isn't he dying?" She tried to speak to him, but no sound came out. She tried to get closer, but her feet felt as if they were nailed to the ground. A wave of fear swept over her, and she backed away involuntarily, running toward the stairs. "Mrs. Cooper, Elliot's awake. He opened his eyes," cried Avery. Mrs. Cooper heard Avery's voice and rushed up the stairs. "Mr. Elliot opens his eyes every day, but that doesn't mean he's awake. You see, he doesn't respond to anything we say now," Mrs. Cooper said, then sighed and added, "Doctors say the chances of someone waking up in a vegetative state are very low." Still feeling a lingering sense of unease, Avery said, "Can I leave the light on at night? I'm a little scared." "Of course," Mrs. Cooper said. "Go to bed early. You're going to the old house tomorrow. I'll wake you up in the morning." "All right," replied Avery. When Mrs. Cooper left, Avery changed into his pajamas and went to bed. She sat stiffly beside Elliot, gazing into his handsome face. She held out her hand and waved it in front of his eyes. Avery looked at him in shock, his heart racing. Some people are conscious even in a vegetative state. Did he hear what she just said? She lay beside him, still feeling uneasy. After a while, she heard herself sigh. "What are you thinking, Elliot?" she asked, but got no response. Avery felt a sudden sadness. Her own suffering was nothing compared to what he had been through. "I hope you wake up soon, Elliot. You won't be able to rest in peace if that vile Cole takes all your money." Elliot closed his eyes slowly. She's officially Mrs. Foster now, and no one will bully her for a while. But what will the Fosters do with Elliot once she's gone? Avery's heart constricted at the thought. She must use her status as Elliot's wife to get back what she lost while he was alive. Avery finds himself in a complicated situation with different attitudes and choices. Henry's wife and Henry believe that Avery's pregnancy will interfere with his studies, and Rosalie wants Avery to bear Elliot's child to ensure that the family has an heir, promising that she and the child will inherit Elliot's vast fortune. Avery agrees to prevent Cole from getting Elliot's money. Cole later confronts Avery, expressing sadness over her decision, and offers to let Avery carry his child, falsely claiming that it was Elliot's, which Avery warns him is dangerous. Finally, Avery returns to Elliot's mansion and is taken to the hospital for a medical examination to prepare for egg extraction or ovulation induction. The female doctor comforts Avery with a rapid heartbeat and asks how long it will take to have a baby. While Avery was applying cream to Elliot, Elliot suddenly woke up and spoke, and this time Avery was sure he was awake. Not only did he keep his eyes open, he spoke to her.
Though his voice was hoarse and slow, it was menacing. Elliot asked who she was. Avery's mind went blank. Everyone around her told her he was going to die soon, so she never thought about what she would do if he woke up.
She rushed downstairs to tell Mrs. Cooper and others, who were surprised when they arrived. The doctor said Elliot would return to normal after following up with rehabilitation, but Rosalie suddenly fainted because of the good news. Henry takes his mother out of the room. The doctor, Mrs. Cooper, and the bodyguard remain in the room. Avery stands in the doorway, afraid to enter. At this time, Elliot regained consciousness and his body exudes a cold breath, which makes people very scary.
He sat with his back against the headboard. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, stared cold at Avery. "Who is she?" he asked in a low, strong voice full of contempt. The doctor was too frightened to breathe. Mrs. Cooper bowed her head and explained, "Master Elliot, she is the wife Lady Rosalie arranged for you while you were ill, and her name is—" Elliot's thin lips parted, his voice dull and cold. "Get her out of here."
Avery is alarmed to see the waking Elliot, who is full of danger like a waking beast. When Mrs. Cooper asks Avery to spend the night in the guest room, Avery, fearing that Elliot will not accept her as his wife, unsuccessfully tries to get his belongings from the master bedroom. The next morning, Mrs. Cooper brings Avery's things and asks her to meet Elliot at the restaurant. Avery was upset when he saw Elliot. She could not resist stealing a glance at him, which immediately caught Elliot's attention. His gaze is like a bottomless black hole that can swallow a man whole. "Hey, I'm Avery Tate." Avery stammered anxiously.
Elliot picked up the coffee cup and took a leisurely sip. His voice was flat and cold. "I heard you might be pregnant with my baby." Avery's heart tightened, and he lost his appetite. "Do you want a surgical abortion or a medical abortion?" He uttered these cruel words in a calm tone.
Avery's face went pale and his mind went blank. When Elliot learned that she might be pregnant, he asked for an abortion and a divorce, and Avery claimed that she was not pregnant and that she was on her period. Later, as Avery prepares to leave, he sees Cole being violently treated by Elliot, and Avery feels bad for Elliot. To fear. She thought that even a man as mean as Cole looked like a fool around him. Avery didn't dare make Elliot angry and didn't want to attract his attention, and left for a hospital checkup. The test showed Avery was pregnant. Avery was pregnant and had bleeding problems. She's about to divorce Elliot and she's hesitant to keep the baby. After being released from the hospital, she first goes to her Uncle Ron's house, but sees her mother Laura and Aunt Miranda fight, and then Avery and Laura leave. When Avery returned to Foster Mansion in the evening, he learned that Elliot was not at home. The next morning, in order to avoid meeting Elliot, he urgently needed to send documents due to the translation work introduced by his classmates. Afraid of being discovered, he went into Elliot's study to send files from his computer for the money. So she used Elliot's computer without permission to send a file, and when she tried to shut it down, her hand shook and she accidentally opened a file. She then became so worried that Elliot would find her that she turned pale when she learned that there were security cameras outside the study. The classmate transferred her $320 and she planned to wait for Elliot to come back and explain to him, hoping he wouldn't be angry, because she had agreed to a divorce and didn't want any more trouble. However, Elliot found out and was furious, telling her to stay in her room until the divorce and not feeding her. 2 days later, Rosalie is discharged from the hospital and arrives at Elliot's mansion, where Elliot says he has something to discuss with her and signals the housekeeper to call Avery. Rosalie sees Avery in a terrible state, thinks that Elliot is abusing her, and learns that Elliot is punishing her for Avery's mistakes. Rosalie rebukes Elliot, emphasizing that Avery is a good girl, and wants them to remain a nominal couple even if there is no love. Elliot does not respond to his mother's inquiries about Avery's mistakes, and Rosalie is sent back to the hospital after nearly fainting. Avery says he wants a divorce, but Elliot disagrees, saying the punishment is not over. A week later, Avery went to the hospital and thought he had lost the babies, only to be told he was pregnant with twins. She knew that the Fosters had arranged all this, and she felt that she was just a fertility tool. Then she received a phone call from her mother and learned that her father was dying. Upon returning home, his father dies, and Avery drags his exhausted body back to Elliot's mansion after the funeral. She found the mansion brightly lit and the living room full of guests. A woman with whom Elliot has an unusual relationship provocates Avery, who smashes a bottle of wine with a bright red liquid that splatters down the edge of the table and drips onto the carpet below. Avery's eyes were bloodshot, and her fingers gripped the bottle tightly, pointing the jagged edges toward the arrogant woman. "You want to hit me? Simon. If you touch me, I'll kill you," she shouted as she walked over to the woman holding the broken bottle. Everyone in the room was stunned. As the smoke rose from Elliot's thin lips, his eagle eyes narrowed. His fiery eyes were fixed on Avery's pained, merciless face. The living room was quiet for an instant, so quiet you could hear the beating of your heart. Avery stormed back into the room and slammed the door shut. A loud noise echoed through the house.
How dare this woman slam the door on Elliot Foster's house? She must not be afraid of death. The crowd looked at Elliot, who reacted calmly and did not seem angry. Usually, if someone in front of him more than 60 decibels of sound, he will frown. Avery closed the door at least 90 decibels. Why wasn't he upset? What's more, the bottle Avery smashed was worth over $30,000, and they hadn't even had a chance to drink it. She broke it without even blinking an eye. Damn, I heard Miss Tate's father died a few days ago, and judging by the way she's dressed all in black, she must have just come back from a funeral. Someone plucked up the courage to break the silence.
The woman who provoked Avery was Chelsea Tierney, Senior Manager of Public Relations at Sterling Corporation. It was her birthday, so she invited a few of Elliot's friends over to celebrate his recovery. Her earlier fight with Avery was a huge blow to her self-esteem. Chelsea noticed Elliot's expressionless face, but she knew him well enough to know that he could explode at any moment. She returned to him and cautiously apologized. "I'm sorry, Elliot. I didn't know her father was dead."
Elliot snuffed out the cigarette in the ashtray, picked up the glass with his long fingers, and drank it down. He put the empty cup back on the table and said in a low, sexy voice, "Happy birthday."
Chelsea, her ears red, replied, "Thank you."
Also, Avery Tate is not someone you can touch, Elliot said, adjusting the collar of his shirt. There was a note of warning in his voice. Even if she was a foster pet, I was the only one who could bully her.
Chelsea panicked. "But you're going to divorce her and she'll be less than a pet."
Elliot's eyes went cold. Even if it were something I no longer wanted, I still won't watch as someone puts her down.
In the guest room, Avery cries over the death of her father, and the next morning meets Elliot in the dining room, where Elliot mentions last night's alcohol and warns her to pay for breaking anything again. Avery saw meat at breakfast and said he wanted to eat a vegetarian meal. After breakfast, Avery is ready to meet his lawyer, and Elliot, who is also going out, coincidentally meets. When Avery was walking, he felt nauseous from the cold wind and was found by Elliot's driver. When Elliot saw Avery, Avery felt embarrassed and explained that he had eaten too much breakfast. Avery learns that his father's death leaves Tate Industries heavily in debt and numerous assets, including real estate, parking lots, shops, and vehicles. She struggled to decide whether to take over the company, which is losing $125 million and would have to inherit debt. Sean, the company's vice president, suggested finding a bank loan or other investors, and Avery was skeptical but still trying. Elliot's assistant Chad briefs him on Tate Industries, which Elliot seems to be interested in. Avery called the major banks in the afternoon, but it didn't go well, and Sean asked her to dress up and meet with the other two bank managers.
In the evening, Chad learns that Avery is having dinner with two bank managers, both of whom have bad reputations. Chad, worried that Avery would hurt Elliot's reputation, asks if he would call Avery, but Elliot refuses and wants to see if she would be so reckless. At 9 p.m., Avery gets out of the cab and returns to Foster Mansion. She was wearing a sexy red slip dress, different from what she wore when she left the house this morning. She left the house in a t-shirt and slacks in the morning. Elliot clenched his fists at the thought of her dressing like this on purpose to please other men.
Avery comes home to change his shoes and sees Elliot sitting on the living room couch, wearing a black shirt and looking cold. Avery tries to avoid Elliot, but Elliot stops her.
Elliot smells alcohol in Avery's hair, asks if she's been drinking with someone else, and grabs her wrist so hard that it hurts her. Avery denies drinking and struggles, and Elliot pulls her into his arms, only to smell another man's alcohol on her clothes, make her undress, and tear her skirt. Avery swore at Elliot and went back to his room and slammed the door. Elliot later reads Chad's message and learns that Avery did not drink with the two men, but still feels that she is at fault.
After Avery gets out of the shower, Mrs. Cooper delivers Elliot's soup and mentions that Rosalie will be discharged from the hospital tomorrow and that Elliot will take Avery to the old house.
He developed special feelings for Avery. For some reason, he kept thinking of Avery's crying face. Moreover, the unique aroma of her body has always haunted his heart. Elliot had never felt this way about a woman in his life. Never before had a woman been able to make him feel such strange emotions. Something about her stirred him up for some reason. Does he need to feel this way about a woman who is about to get divorced? To him, it was a completely foreign and absurd feeling.
In Avery's eyes, Elliot's face had turned into that of a demon baring its sharp fangs at her. "Why?" she asked bitterly. "Even if you didn't want kids, there's no need for you to say such cruel words."
Elliot's deep eyes were cold as he said, "What if you decided to take the chance if I didn't make myself clear?"
Avery took a deep breath and shifted her gaze from him. She was terrified. It felt like she was about to fall into a bottomless pit. Her reaction piqued Elliot's curiosity.
His lips curled up as he mocked. "You're not really thinking of having my kid, are you?"
Avery glared at him.
"I suggest you take my warning seriously. You know the kind of person I am. My actions will be much more severe than my words." "Don't test me if you want to live," Elliot said, then turned to look out the window.
Avery clenched her fists and huffed. "Don't worry, I will never give you children. You know how much I despise you. The most urgent matter right now is to quickly get a divorce." The babies did not belong to him alone. If she gave birth, she would be doing it for herself. Once the kids were grown, she would tell them that their father was dead.
Now isn't the time. We'll talk about it again once my mothers get better, Elliot said.
His tone was calmer. Perhaps her words were effective. It made him realize that he was not the man she wanted. Don't drag it out for too long then, Avery said. She furrowed her brows and was a little anxious. Her pregnancy would begin to show if they delayed things further. She would not be able to keep it from him by then and would definitely be forced to get an abortion.
You're in a hurry to divorce me. Is there some urgent matter you need to attend to? Elliot asked as his cold eyes fell on her, trying to see through her.
Avery's heart suddenly skipped a bit. Nope. There's nothing urgent. I just don't want to stay with you. Has nobody ever told you how suffocating it is to be by your side?
They wouldn't dare say it even if they thought it, Elliot replied dryly.
Oh. It's no wonder you don't like me, Avery said with a pout. But it's stifling to not say what I want to say.
Elliot pondered to himself and thought she had misunderstood something in the end. No man could tolerate his wife dressing up like a prostitute to escort other men.
Wearing a slip dress makes me a prostitute? Socializing is escorting other men? What about when you men socialize? Avery retorted. Even if you hold a knife to my neck right now, I would still insist that I wasn't wrong last night. It was like they were both from different planets. Other than the fact that they were both human, they were complete opposites in every other.
Are you saying you'd do it again? Elliot said. His lips were slightly curled upwards in a sinister manner.
Avery pursed her lips and pushed herself into the corner out of instinct. I don't even drink. How could I possibly drink with others? I wouldn't drink even if the sky falls. She would never take the lives of the babies in her womb lightly. Even if her father's company goes bankrupt, she would never sell herself out for money. Avery's answer extinguished the raging fury inside of Elliot. The driver drove the car towards Elliot's mansion. Avery jumped out of the car just as it came to halt, as if trying to escape.
Elliot watched her slender back, then said to the driver, "To the office."
Avery let out a heavy sigh of relief after the car drove off. After she took an afternoon nap, she arrived at Tate Industries at 2:30 p.m. She decided to sell off her father's assets to pay off some of the debt. She wanted to deal with what she could and pay off what she could before thinking about looking for an investor. The banks were out of the question. She had completely offended the managers of River City Bank and Silver Linings Bank the night before. Both managers made it clear that they would never give her a loan. Don't blame yourself, Avery. If you drank last night, they probably would have acted out of line with you, Sean said with a frown. You're not that kind of woman, and I would never force you to do something like that. Avery nodded and said, I wouldn't do it even if you forced me. Sean's cheeks flushed as he nodded. I arranged a list last night of the few affluent individuals in Evansville. All of them have the ability to produce the funds to save our company. You just need to convince one of them and we'll be saved. Avery took the list and quickly looked it over. On the list were names, genders, company names, current net worth and contact information. Some of them had phone numbers while some did not. How am I supposed to contact the ones without contact information? Avery asked. The ones without contact information are the ones I couldn't get my hands on. We'll just have to meet those ones at their companies, Sean replied. Avery browsed the list once again. This time she discovered a key point. The second name on the list clearly printed out Elliot Foster. Elliot Foster, male, Sterling Group, net worth over $15 billion. Contact information: none. Avery's face flushed as she asked sheepishly, Is Elliot Foster that rich? She picked up a glass of water from the table and took a sip to hide her anxiety. That's just a safe estimate. His net worth should be a lot higher than that, Sean answered assuredly. He founded Sterling Group when the internet was just starting. However popular the internet is now is how much he's worth. I see. It's a shame I couldn't find his contact information. You'll just have to go to Sterling Group to meet him. I'll come with you when you decide to go see him. Avery shook her head violently and said, I won't meet him. She picked up a pen and crossed Elliot's name out on the list. He would never lend her the money. If she went to him to ask for a loan, she would just be asking to be humiliated. Avery stopped by the drugstore on her way home that evening. She walked into the store and wanted to buy something for her bruise. After the pharmacist recommended a few products to her, she suddenly thought of a question. Is this safe to use during pregnancy? It's better to avoid it. Are you pregnant? Asked the pharmacist. Avery nodded in silence. The pharmacist immediately took back the products she recommended before and passed her a bottle of pills. How far along are you? Your bump isn't showing yet, so now's a good time for calcium supplements. This one's great and absorbs well. Obstetricians are always recommending this one to pregnant mothers. Avery arrived home with the calcium supplements half an hour later. It was past dinner time, but Mrs. Cooper left some food out for her. What did you get, madam? Mrs. Cooper asked when she saw the drugstore logo on the bag Avery was holding. Avery hid the bag behind her back and said, Just something for my bruise. We have something for that at home. We have most common medications here. Just let me know if you need anything next time and I'll get it for you, Mrs. Cooper said with a smile. Okay, I'm going up now, Avery said, then turned and made her way back to her room. She was caught off guard and bumped into Elliot.
He arrived when she was talking to Mrs. Cooper earlier. He clearly saw the contents of the bag Avery hid behind her back. Why did you lie? He asked as his dangerous eyes fell on the bag of calcium tablets.
The calcium supplements for pregnant women were the same type that the elderly and those that lack calcium take, so it clearly stated calcium tablets on the bottle. Do you have to tell other people exactly what kind of medication you take? Avery asked. Her cheeks were flushed, but her tone was relatively stable. She hurried off after she said that. He kept the bottle of pills in a drawer, then washed up in the bathroom. Things could not go on like this. Everything would be exposed if she did not leave soon. All of her checkup reports were in the room. Elliot would find out about everything if he decided to check her room. Of course, reason told her that Elliot might be a little extreme, but he was not actually crazy. He probably would not go as far as to check her room. Besides, if he did not mention it, she had no way of divorcing him. Her family accepted the exorbitant betrothal fees from the Foster family after all. Avery sat on the edge of the bed with her mind in such a frenzy that she forgot about her hunger. There was a knock on the door shortly after. She snapped herself back to reality and walked over to open the door. Master Elliot's back in his room, madam. Come and have something to eat, Mrs. Cooper said with a kind smile. Avery's anxiety subsided. At the mansion, aside from Elliot, everyone treated her quite well. Perhaps they take care of her because of her young age. When she arrived at the dining room with Mrs. Cooper, there was a hearty spread on the table. I can't eat all of this myself, Mrs. Cooper. You should sit down and join me. Mrs. Cooper smiled and said, Eat however much you can, madam. We have rules. I can't overstep. I see, Avery said, then added, Do you have children? Now that Elliot was not around, Avery felt a lot more relaxed. I do. They're in college now. They're about your age. Why do you ask, madam? Avery's face reddened slightly as she grinned and said, I'm just making conversation. I heard that your figure changes after giving birth, but you look really good. I couldn't eat much when I was pregnant. My weight never went over 110 pounds, so my figure didn't change much. Was your bump not obvious when you were pregnant then? That's right. I looked like I was only 5 to 6 months pregnant when I was actually 7 to 8 months pregnant. People wouldn't even notice that I was pregnant when I wore loose-fitting clothes. Avery felt inspired upon hearing Mrs. Cooper's words. She placed her fork and knife down after only taking a few bites of her food. She had to watch her figure so her baby bump would not be obvious. "Why aren't you eating anymore, madam?" Mrs. Cooper asked when she noticed how uncharacteristically little Avery had eaten. "I'm not that hungry," Avery answered. "You don't need to leave me this much food for dinner next time. I don't want to gain weight. You're not fat at all. I don't like working out, so it's better for me to just watch what I eat." Avery returned to her room after walking out of the dining room and pulled out the report from her latest checkup. The doctor wrote down her next appointment date last time. She had to go to the hospital for a checkup when she was 3 months pregnant. She glanced at the date on the file and saw that it was coincidentally the next day. Avery lay back on the bed and placed her hand on her belly. She wanted to feel the presence of the babies, but she felt nothing. She did not throw up much during her pregnancy, but her appetite was different from before. She lost some weight lately. Before she ate, her belly was completely flat. But hey, I got a vent here. Seriously, can you really hide a twin pregnancy? I'm not so sure about that, to be honest. What do you guys think? Please leave your comments below.
Let's keep listening.
Avery woke up early the next morning and headed to the hospital. There were more tests to be done that day, so it was noon in the blink of an eye. Since a few of the reports would only be ready at 2 in the afternoon, she decided to grab a bite to eat nearby. Someone tapped her on the shoulder when she walked out of the hospital. Avery turned her head and saw a slightly familiar face. "It really is you." Chelsea was wearing a white dress and a black blazer. Her makeup was exquisite and her hair was pulled back. She looked both smart and stylish. "Are you sick?" she asked. "I'm just here for a routine checkup," Avery responded. She did not want to have much interaction with her, but Chelsea did not plan to let her go that easily. "You haven't eaten, right? Let me buy you lunch. It was my bad last time. I'd like to apologize to you." "I'm not mad. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit." "I don't mean any harm," Chelsea said with an expression of feigned innocence. As if turning down her invitation was the worst thing one could do. Avery agreed to have lunch with her in the end. The blood test this morning required her to go in on an empty stomach, so Avery did not eat anything. At this point she was so hungry that her ankles were weak and she was seeing stars. They picked a restaurant nearby and sat down. Avery ordered a couple of simple vegetable dishes. Chelsea went even further and ordered 2 salads, then passed the menu back to the waiter. "I don't eat mains for lunch. I have to keep my figure," Chelsea said when she noticed Avery's shocked expression. "Let's talk about you and Elliot. I heard that Madame Rosalie likes you a lot and won't agree to a divorce. You're in a pickle." Avery took a sip of water and asked, "Why didn't you nominate yourself when his mother was looking for a wife for him back then?" Chelsea chuckled bitterly and said, "I was traveling out of the country at the time, so I had no idea what was happening. You were already married by the time I got back." "Oh, what a coincidence," Avery said. Chelsea cocked an eyebrow. "Are you suspicious of me? Nobody can question my love for Elliot. He doesn't like kids, so I got my uterus removed. Could you do that?" Avery was frozen in stunned silence. "I'm no longer a complete woman. I can never have children, but I have no regrets. I'm willing to do anything for him," Chelsea said proudly as she lifted her head up high. It looked like she was waiting for someone to praise her for being courageous and special. "Elliot is insane and so are you. He hurts other people when he goes crazy and you hurt yourself. It was stupid of you to hurt yourself for him," Avery said. Chelsea's expression changed in an instant and her tone was much colder when she said, "What do you know? Elliot never hangs out with other women, but he's willing to be with me." "You're wrong. There's someone he likes, Chelsea. Stop acting stupid for him," Avery said. Her emotions were a little messed up, so she spoke without thinking. She pursed her lips in annoyance after saying those words. How was it her business what Chelsea did? If Elliot found out that she revealed his secret, he would unleash a heavy punishment on her. Chelsea's face was frozen for a few seconds before she burst into laughter, as if she had just heard a joke. That's impossible. There's no way Elliot likes you. I didn't say he liked me. I'm talking about another woman, Avery sighed. That's even more impossible, Chelsea exclaimed. Elliot doesn't have any other women by his side apart from him. I've known him for 10 years and my brother has known him for close to 20 years. I know him better than anyone. Something snapped in Avery's head. For a moment she did not know what was real and what was not. There was no reason for Chelsea to lie to her. However, if Chelsea was not lying, then what about the thing she saw on Elliot's computer? Who told you there was someone Elliot liked? Where did you get the information? Do you know what her name is? Chelsea was beginning to feel uneasy despite being adamant that Elliot had no other woman besides her. Avery shook her head and said, "What I said was just my opinion. I don't know Elliot as well as you do." Avery changed her stance after calming down a little. She realized that things were not as simple as they seemed, and she did not want to be dragged in. She just wanted to give birth to her babies and live an average life. You scared me. I thought you saw him with a woman. Chelsea relaxed after hearing Avery's explanation. Elliot isn't the kind of man you think he is. He hates women and kids. Do you know why he doesn't like kids? Avery asked casually. To be honest, I have no idea. I don't want to know either. If he doesn't like them, I just won't have them, Chelsea said, then furrowed her brows and mumbled to herself, "He's actually pretty nice to me. As long as you're happy." Avery gave up trying to change her mind. Everyone had the freedom of choice. What was important was being able to deal with the consequences of those choices. She thought Chelsea was foolish. However, in the eyes of others, her decision to give birth to her and Elliot's children was probably foolish as well. When the food was served, Avery was so hungry that she began to eat right away. Chelsea had a lot on her mind and had lost her appetite. "Are you sure you didn't fall in love with Elliot?" she asked. "I'm sure," Avery answered with a nod. Chelsea could not understand her. "Why? He's capable and good-looking." Avery looked up at her and said, "If I had to choose between you and him, I'd choose you. At least that way she would not get hurt." Chelsea was utterly taken aback by her answer. "Why? Are you?" Avery waved her hand in the air and said, "I was just using it as an example. It's fine as long as you get what I mean." Chelsea completely lowered her defenses, as Avery suddenly began to look a lot more pleasant to her. She thought of how Avery was the only one in her family that worked to maintain her father's company after his passing. Chelsea could not stop sympathy from welling up within her. "You're still in college, right?" Chelsea asked. Avery took a sip of water, then answered, "I'm graduating next year." I heard about your dad's company. His debt has nothing to do with you since he has passed. You should focus on graduating and living your life," Chelsea advised. "Where are you supposed to find the money to pay off all of your dad's debt? Don't push yourself like this." Avery lowered her gaze and did not respond. Everyone around her was telling her to give up on Tate Industries. $125 million was not a small amount. Even her own mother was asking her to give up. However, Sean was always telling her how revolutionary the company's new product was, and that everything would only go upwards from here as long as they got through this obstacle. Avery was constantly battling against her conflicting thoughts. Chelsea paid for lunch when they were almost done eating. As their meal mainly consisted of vegetables, they did not spend much. Therefore, Avery did not insist on paying for the meal. "Give me your number," Chelsea said when she walked over to Avery after paying the bill. "What's the point?" Avery said. Elliot and I are getting divorced soon, so there'll be no reason for us to meet after that. Chelsea was a little upset about being rejected, but the thought of never seeing Avery again comforted her. That's true. When that happens, I'll be the only one by Elliot's side, Chelsea said as she shot a glare at Avery before walking away. At 2:30 p.m., Avery met the doctor after receiving all of her reports. The doctor browsed through the reports, then adjusted her glasses and said, "Everything looks good. However, it looks like you're pregnant with fraternal twins." Avery sat frozen in stunned silence. "Do you still want to get rid of them now?" teased the doctor. "The probability of being pregnant with fraternal twins is about the same as winning the lottery. You basically hit the jackpot." Avery's heart was thumping wildly in her chest. Fraternal twins. She had only ever heard of fraternal twins, but she had never met a pair in real life. If you do decide to get an abortion, it's best to do it while you're still in your first trimester. The longer you wait, the bigger the risk. It's a cruel thing both for you and the babies. Right now, your babies are already taking shape inside you, said the doctor. "Doctor, I'm keeping them. I want to give birth to my babies." At that moment, Avery had finally made up her mind. "Great. Fill up these forms for me and I'll open up a file for you." It was 4 in the afternoon when Avery emerged from the hospital. Perhaps it was because she had gotten up early and had not taken a nap, but she was on the verge of falling asleep. It was like she was seeing the world through a filter. People. Cars. She could see neither of them too clearly. She took a cab back home, went straight to her room and fell into a deep slumber. It was almost dark out when Avery finally woke up. She sat in a daze on the bed. Both her mind and stomach were empty. She knew she was hungry, but she could not bring herself to move a muscle. Her phone suddenly began to ring, so she picked it up and answered. "Avery, did you contact the names on the list I gave you?" Sean's voice came from the other end of the line. Avery lowered her gaze, took a breath and said, "I didn't. I'll do it tomorrow. It's the weekend tomorrow. You shouldn't bother them then. Maybe you can call them now?" Sean said. "Sure," Avery responded. "Do you need me to send you a copy of the list?" Sean asked. "It's fine, I have it here with me," Avery answered. "Remember to try calling some of them tonight. Make sure to sound sincere and, I know. I'm going to have dinner now. Oh, that's right. Where have you been staying since the repossession of your house?" Avery looked around the guest bedroom she was staying in and said, "I rented a place. Don't worry about me. I'm fine." "'Kay, Avery. I'll be waiting for some good news from you." Avery could not taste her dinner. Returning to her room, she began to contact the people on her list. The moment they heard her name, they did not give her a chance to say her piece. They immediately rejected her and hung up. It only took her 20 minutes to make all the calls. All of them had rejected her. Nobody wanted to hear about the new product from Tate Industries. She was defeated before she even had a chance to put in the work. Did she really have to give up? If she did, then Tate Industries would be gone forever. If she did not, then what else could she do to save it? The room suddenly felt heavy and suffocating. Avery threw on a long cardigan and walked out of the room. The living room was empty and the whole house was quiet. She wrapped the cardigan around herself and walked out of the house. The evening wind caressed her hair, making it billow around her face. The coldness of the night pierced her bones. She was strolling aimlessly down the street when a wave of memories suddenly filled her mind. Everyone had seen her as the heiress to Tate Industries who never had a worry in her life. Nobody knew how many cold meals and sick nights she had spent on her own. A black luxury sedan rolled into the neighborhood. It slowed down until it came to a halt. Elliot slowly opened his eyes. From his car window, he saw a woman crouched on the ground underneath the warm glow of the streetlights. She had her arms tightly wrapped around her knees. Avery's shoulders were trembling from her sobs. The car sped past Avery, leaving a trail of dust. She lifted her head and saw the blurry tail lights of the Rolls-Royce in the darkness. Was that Elliot's car? She wiped the tears off her face, calmed herself down and walked toward the house. She saw the car parked in the courtyard when she arrived. She waited outside in hopes of going in after Elliot had gone to his room. Her eyes stung. She looked up at the stars shining brightly in the night sky. It was a beautiful spring night. Before she knew it, she had been standing outside for an hour. The driver had already moved the car into the garage. The lights in the living room were still on, but there was nobody in sight. Avery felt normal, so she walked slowly into the house.
On the veranda on the second floor, Elliot, dressed in a gray robe, was sitting in his wheelchair. The last dregs of wine sat at the bottom of his wine glass. He had watched Avery the entire hour that she had stood outside in the cold. He could not figure out the thoughts that would lead her to spend an entire hour out in the cold. She was so still that she could have easily blended in with the trees that stood next to her. Elliot had met countless intelligent minds in his lifetime because they were the only people worthy enough to stand by his side. However, Avery was an exception. He did not consider her bright because she had provoked him despite knowing what kind of man he was. She was an extremely foolish woman. Seeing her miserable, however, affected his mood in a peculiar way. It was a feeling that he had never felt before.
Maybe it was because of the cold wind, but Avery's head felt heavy by the time she got to her room. She took out a thick blanket from the closet, wrapped herself in it, and fell into a deep slumber. She sweated all night, ridding herself of the chill from the night wind. When Avery woke up the next morning, aside from feeling a little sticky, she was in relatively good spirits. She took a shower, changed into clean clothes, and went downstairs. She followed the smell of food to the dining room, and Mrs. Cooper immediately served her breakfast. "Has he had breakfast?" Avery asked. "No, Master Elliot hasn't come down yet." Hearing this, Avery picked up her glass of milk and a piece of toast, then began to wolf down her breakfast. She was done eating in under 5 minutes. "Are you that afraid of him, madam?" Mrs. Cooper teased. "I'm not afraid. I just don't want to see him," Avery said, then lifted her chin slightly and added, "Seeing him makes me uncomfortable." "You'll be fine after spending a little more time together," said Mrs. Cooper. "Will you be coming home for lunch?" "I won't. I have something to do on campus today, so I won't be having dinner at home either." "All right. I'll go get the driver to take you there," Mrs. Cooper said. She left, intending to inform the driver of his duty. Avery immediately stopped her and said, "It's fine. I'll just take a cab. He can have the driver. We have 2 drivers at home. One for Master Elliot and one for the odd jobs." "I'll get the other one to take you," said Mrs. Cooper. Avery could not win against her. Once they had arrived on campus, Avery turned to the driver and said, "Thank you. You can head back now. I'll find my own way home later." After the driver drove off, a young woman ran up to Avery, tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Avery. Who was that Portia cutie?" Avery did not expect to bump in her best friend Tammy Lynch to be at the campus entrance. "He's not a cutie. It's Mr. Portia to you," Avery said as they walked into campus together. "Tammy, I don't think I can go to graduate school with you." Tammy stopped in her tracks and said, "Is it because of your family? I heard about your dad." "I'm so sorry." Avery managed a smile and said, "Actually, I never really wanted to go to graduate school." "I know you're thinking of marrying your boyfriend after graduation, right?" Tammy said. "When are you going to introduce me to him?" Avery was taken aback. She had only told her mother of what had happened with Cole. Her friends and classmates only knew that she was dating someone but had no idea who he was. "We broke up," Avery said. She then took a deep breath and said, "Do you know what it feels like to have someone completely destroy your trust? I thought he was the best man in the world, but he was nothing but human. *M. Tammy placed her arm around Avery's waist when she saw her red eyes and said, "Forget about that, Avery. We're still young. Just think of it as a lesson learned. You'll definitely meet someone even better later." "I'm better off depending on myself than a man," Avery chuckled. "We need to go through some heartbreak to grow," Tammy sighed. "You were completely love-struck before summer break, but look at the mature young lady you've turned into now." Avery shook her head and said, "I just hope I can take care of myself after graduation." "Of course. You're the only double major I know who's at top of the class in both majors. The sky's the limit for someone like you," Tammy exclaimed. Avery's cheeks flushed at the praise. At 5 in the evening, Avery and Tammy left the campus together. They had planned to have dinner together. When they arrived at the campus gates, Tammy instantly pointed at the Porsche parked by the street. "Avery, isn't that the Mr. Porsche who dropped you off this morning? Is he here to pick you up?" Tammy still remembered the car. After all, luxury cars and beautiful people were pleasing to the eyes. Avery looked toward the open window of the Porsche. She glanced at the driver and he glanced back at her. He was taken aback. Did she not tell him not to pick her up? What was going on? She walked over to the parked car as the driver opened the door to the back seat for her. "What is it?" Avery asked in a low voice. Since Tammy was there, the driver was cautious.
Let's talk in the car.
Avery's heart tightened in her chest. "Just go if you're busy, Avery." "Let's go out some other time," Tammy said. Avery nodded and said, "It'll be my treat next time." Tammy waved her hand and said, "There's no need for that. Call me if you need anything." The car sped off once Avery was seated.
"Did you do something to make Master Elliot mad again, madam?" asked the driver.
Avery raised her brows and answered, "I didn't." "Did he ask you to pick me up?"
"Yes," he said. "You better prepare yourself."
Avery's heart raced in her chest as she racked her brain. No way. She was on campus the whole day. She had not even seen Elliot, let alone anger him. She went through all the events of the past few days, but she did not have a clue. It was not until her head began to throb in pain that she stopped thinking about it. They arrived at the house at 5:40 in the evening. When the car came to a halt, Avery got down. She changed into her house slippers and noticed Elliot sitting alone in the living room. He was wearing a green shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing his muscular forearms. The sapphires on his cufflinks shone brightly. He was sitting comfortably on the couch, exuding the charm and arrogance of a long-reigning king.
"Sit." Elliot glanced coldly at Avery.
"Okay," she said.
She took the couch opposite him. There was a laptop sitting on the coffee table. The screen was facing her and on it was surveillance footage. There was a bed in the footage and on it was her and Elliot. Avery's blood boiled at the sight on the screen. She shot to her feet, pointed at the laptop and yelled, "Are you a pervert? Did you install a camera in the bedroom?" She was livid. She wanted to forget about the 3 months that she shared a bed with him. He was in a vegetative state during those 3 months, so she had never even seen him as a man. Even those who looked sophisticated in public would have some inelegant behavior in the privacy of their bedrooms. It was the reason Avery could not accept that she had been under surveillance for 3 months. Nobody had told her there were surveillance cameras in the room when she had been staying with him.
The sight of Avery's trembling body actually calmed Elliot down slightly. "Why did you assume I was the one who installed the cameras?" He had found out that his mother had installed surveillance cameras in his bedroom while he was ill. She had wanted him from suffering any abuse at the hands of his caretakers. Even if he was a powerful man who would be afraid of someone in a vegetative state, Elliot could not be angry at his mother because he knew she had done it with the best intentions. He had retrieved the footage from his mother and browsed through them that day. His blood pressure rose slightly after watching the videos. He had never expected Avery to be that kind of woman.
Oh, it was your mother? Avery said, but she was still uneasy, and her rage continued to burn. How could she do that? She could have at least told me about it.
I...
You never expected me to wake up, did you? Elliot hissed as his eyes shot daggers at her. It looked like you had fun messing with my body when I was sick.
Avery's cheeks flushed as she fell back onto the couch. I did not. I wasn't messing around. I was giving you a massage. It was to prevent muscle atrophy. After she moved into the mansion, she had watched the nurse give Elliot physical therapy many times, and she took over the job soon after. She had done it because she had felt awkward sitting in the room. A spectator in his nightly treatments, she had watched his nurse go about her job. For a moment, Avery's adamant denial made Elliot wonder if he was wrongly accusing her. It was a good thing that the cameras had recorded everything.
Open it up and see for yourself, he said. He did not want to listen to her argue.
Avery's hand trembled as she reached out and hit the play button on the surveillance footage. Of course, she knew what she had done. However, there was no way she would admit that she had fooled around with his body. She just touched him a little bit. She would not have done any of it if she had known that he would regain consciousness. If she had known that there were cameras in the room, she would not have touched him even if someone had threatened to have her arms chopped off. Avery turned her head away. She did not want to see the contents of the footage. Even so, she could still see it all from the corner of her eye. Elliot did not disappoint her. The footage in the laptop was the perfect weapon against her. It clearly documented exactly how she had played with his body. Avery took a deep breath and decided to talk her way out of the situation. I can explain. The doctors had told me that you had been close to death, so I had never expected you to wake up, and I was also seriously giving you physiotherapy. You can't just focus on me touching you while ignoring all my hard work. I sort of contributed to your recovery. Elliot's head began to ache as he listened to her explanation. Let me find a clip of me giving you a proper massage. Avery was not backing down, and she slid her fingers on the laptop's touchpad. 1 minute later, she shut the laptop and shot to her feet. Shit, she cried as her face turned a crimson red. Did you see all of that? All the footage in here? You've seen it all, haven't you? Her mind was in a frenzy.
Elliot knew exactly why she was reacting that way. Of course, he drawled nonchalantly.
Ah.
You bastard. Who told you to look? You hooligan. Avery was so angry that she was gritting her teeth. She had seen a clip of herself naked. She would occasionally walk out of the bathroom naked when she forgot to bring her clothes in. Elliot was unconscious anyway, so she was not concerned. Never in her dreams did she expect there to be cameras in the bedroom.
You're the one who was naked. Why are you blaming me? Elliot could not wrap his head around her. Aside from the fact that you're blindingly fair, there isn't much to look at, he said in a hoarse voice.
Why you... Avery's eyes darkened with rage. She was beyond furious. Who are you to judge my body? Shut your mouth if you don't know what to say. I'm deleting everything. She picked up the laptop and angrily stormed off to her room and slammed the door behind her. The driver was smoking outside, so he had heard Avery's hysterical shrieks from time to time. When he heard the sound of the door slamming, he sighed at his own lack of imagination. In his lifetime, he finally got to see a woman get into Elliot Foster's head. At 7 in the evening, Avery had deleted all of the surveillance footage and returned the laptop to the coffee table in the living room. The commotion earlier had taken a toll on her. She was starving, so she put on a brave face and walked into the dining room. Elliot was not there, but she still felt uneasy. It felt as if there were cameras all over the house, monitoring her every move. I didn't know there were surveillance cameras in the master bedroom, madam, Mrs. Cooper explained. Master Elliot really had nothing to do with it. Nobody cares more about privacy than he does. It's fine. I already deleted everything, said Avery. She lost her appetite after eating just a bit of food. She set her spoon down and turned to Mrs. Cooper. Was he in an unusually bad mood earlier? Kind of, answered Mrs. Cooper. I see, Avery said. Whatever. It's not like he can stand up and beat me up, right? She made up her mind. Since her privacy meant nothing to him, she might as well face things openly. She strode out of the dining room, intending to do as she pleased, but things did not go her way. She bumped into Elliot just as she left the dining room. He said nothing and did nothing. His dark eyes just looked coldly at her. There was a peculiar charm in his eyes. They were deep and vast, and it was as if he could see through her in an instant. It drove her heart into a giddy, uneven beat.
Move. His voice was low and magnetic.
Avery froze for a moment, then turned sideways. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she watched Elliot enter the dining room. She thought he was there to mess with her, but he had just come down for dinner. She smacked herself in the head and let out a long sigh. He just saw her naked body. What's the big deal? When she was giving him physiotherapy before, she practically saw his naked body too.